The demands for money which were made to him were as frequent as the requests for the remission of a sentence or for restitution. In most cases he gave. Sometimes he lent, and then the loan appeared on the accounts of the intendant general. It was a mere question of account, for the creditor never reclaimed the debts. Most frequently, on the occasion of a baptism or a marriage, he put the note at the bottom of a basket, covered it with some jewel or sweetmeat, and sent it to the debtor. Some, however, he did not lose sight of, and had kept up the accounts up to 1815. If the sum granted was important, he scrawled an order on the treasury. If smaller, he took a rouleau from his drawer, or, calling a secretary, had it paid out of the petty cash. He did not like to be thanked, and would not allow it, even from those most familiar with him. Those whom it was his pleasure to load with kindnesses without the trouble of asking for anything, he either sent them away with the gratuity, or he slipped into their hand a scrap of paper, and on that paper a big figure of money, to be drawn from his staff. There was never any familiarity. He kept to his rank to show that the audience was finished. In most cases, a sign of the head, sometimes a glance at the list on the table sufficed. He never gave his hand. A century ago, shaking hands was a mark of equality, and was scarcely ever used by a superior to an inferior. As to kissing hands, which the Bourbons re-established, Napoleon thought it a little degrading. There were, therefore, none of those external marks so freely used later, which became so commonplace. On a single occasion, it seems, his feelings carried him away. It was in 1815, at the beginning of the 100 Days, when Monsieur Molay entered his salon. That Molay, for him, he proved his confidence and personal esteem by appointing him, at 29 years of age, Counselor of State and Director General of Bridges and Roads. At 33 years, Grand Judge and Minister of Justice, reserving for him the succession to Cambacérès, Arch-Chancellor and Grand Dignitary. On that day, then, he went up to Molay, pressed his hand, and embraced him. It is, we may believe, one of the few cases where, in one of his own palaces, he thus put aside his imperial dignity. Otherwise, as he said, he would have been clapped on the shoulder every day. At 9:30, the levee and the audiences should have come to an end, for it is the hour fixed for the déjeuner. But most frequently the audiences lasted until 11 o'clock. The prefect of the palace is waiting, and the déjeuner gets cold. No precaution is taken against poison. The regulation, indeed, says that dishes from the kitchen and a confectionery are to be brought in covered, as well as the water, the bread, and the wine, and that as soon as the table is laid out, a maitre d'hotel was always to remain in charge. But as a table, very small round table, mahogany, cannot be placed in the salon in which the emperor is giving audience, the déjeuner in silver plates with covers surmounted with an eagle and placed on dish warmers filled with hot water, which is renewed as required, goes on simmering in a corner of the antechamber until the emperor gives notice that he wishes to eat. The small tables then quickly arranged and covered with a napkin by the carver, the prefect of the palace, in a fine coat of amaranth embroidered with silver, walks before the emperor and stands near to the table, the service of which is performed by the maitre d'hotel of the emperor, Guigné. Notice, do not? The Guigné is of a family, all of whom have been employed in the service of the king and of the princes of the house of Bourbon. Another Guigné was still valet de chambre to Louis XVIII. A female Guigné was in charge of the linen of Marie Antoinette. Guigné, called Dunant, was himself the son of a cook of the Prince de Condé, and having served his apprenticeship at the Palais Bourbon, became chef to the Duc de Bourbon, went on his travels, followed him into emigration, and was then his cook. Wearied out the travels of the army of the Condé, he found a place with the Prince Louis de Rohan, and succeeded in re-entering Paris, and was favorably received in the household of the first consul, in which he became maitre d'hotel. After they obtained the place of custodian. At Versailles, Dunant had a yearly salary of 6,000 francs, besides frequent gratuities, the largest in 1810 of 3,000 francs. In this royalist origin, he was not exceptional. Much of the principal servants, the ushers, and the groups were brought up as he had been, and it's curious to find the same names among the servants of the pretender at Hartwell and among those of the Emperor de Tuileries. The Maitre Hotel, in a green coat embroidered with silver, coat which cost 500 francs, with white waistcoat, black knee breeches, white silk stockings, and shoes with buckles, presented his menu the evening before to the first controlling maitre d'hotel, who discussed it in the office of the control, submitted it to the prefect of the palace on duty, and gave the orders to the appointed and sworn purveyors. The articles of food were delivered, carefully packed, at the office of the control by porters who were known there and approved. Articles were weighed, examined, and measured by a sub-controller, then passed on to the maitre d'hotel, who personally superintended the execution of his menu. This menu, by the emperor's orders, was very limited and gave no room for the imagination of Dunan to display itself. In 1810, the déjeuner was to consist of 1 soup, 3 entrees, 2 entremets, 2 dishes of dessert, a cup of coffee, 2 rolls of bread, and for drink a bottle of Chambertin. At a later time, the menu was still further reduced and consisted of 2 soups, a roast, 1 entremet, 2 hors d'oeuvres, 4 plates of dessert, compote, fruit, cheese and sweetmeats, and coffee. Emperor allowed these to be put before him, but he never touched so many dishes. He ate very quickly, not over cleanlily, often putting his hands in the dish and making many splashes on the clothes. He followed no particular order, but passed from the entremets to the hors d'oeuvre and then returned to the roast. He restricted himself to none of the rules usual in the classic repast, and masticated large mouthfuls very imperfectly. As haste to be done, the meal usually lasted no more than 7 or 8 minutes. What he preferred was fowl with any kind of sauce, poulet sauté à la Provençale, without garlic, for garlic disagreed with him. Fowl à l'Italienne, à la tartare, à la Marengo, fowl fricassee, sautéed or roasted. He was very fond of fried things, and a pastry, vol au vent, bouchée à la reine, and petit tambour à la milanaise. Also boudins à la Richelieu, quenelles of poultry au consommé, and above everything, of macaroni in the Italian way with Parmesan cheese. Of fish he placed before everything red mullet from the Mediterranean. That was one of his treats. After Egypt, for a long time, the usual dishes of his table were pilau and dates. But this was one of the fancies, not of his appetite, but of his imagination, just as when he used to believe with great sincerity that he preferred the soldier's soup to delicately made soups, and valued above all vegetables, potatoes, haricots, and lentils. Those who served him did not willingly admit such tastes, for it was the time when the great French cuisine still had its traditions, when it was still a point of honor within the maitre d'hotel, and when the composition of a menu was an honor or a dishonor to its author, so that when the emperor asked Dunan why he never gave him pork crevettes, a sort of sausage, Dunan replied that it was because they were ingestible. But really, said he, because he thought them scarcely consistent with good living and scarcely a nature to do honor to the imperial cuisine. The next day he set up crepinettes of partridge, and the emperor found them excellent and ate heartily of them. It was in this, as with his clothes. The pay of a captain is enough for me, he was fond of saying, and in the course of the night, the morning, and the day, he changed his linen and his dress 3 times in 24 hours. Very fastidious. He would scarcely eat French beans, of which he was very fond, for fear of finding them stringy, which he said had the same effect on him as hairs, and the mere thought of hairs in what he ate turned his stomach. At Cherbourg, however, in May 1811, having taken a fancy to go and breakfast on the Mole, he stopped at a guardhouse and had some of the ammunition bread and the soldier's soup brought to him. The first thing he found in the soup was a long hair. In spite of his turning against it, he took the hair out and he ate the soup, but the soldiers were looking at him. Of roast meat, he looked out for the part which was most done, brownest, and he had a horror of underdone meat. The dishes at déjeuner were all served up at once, and he took off the covers himself from the dishes, which were at once removed when the contents did not please him. When it pleased him too much, he scolded. Monsieur, said he to his maitre d'hotel, You can see plainly that you make me eat too much, and I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable. I only wish to have 2 dishes served. Sometimes he was capricious, which now and then was followed by loss of temper. Tunan, having seen that the crabinets of partridge pleased his master, a month afterwards put them again on the menu. Emperor uncovered the dish, got in a rage, pushed the table away, upset it on the carpet, and retired to his study. The servants hastened to clear away the table service, and Tunan, like a worthy descendant of Tao, went at once to the Grand Marshal to give in his resignation. Turok consoled him, sent him back again, told him to prepare a second meal. In fact, the Emperor asked for it. Rustem handed the déjeuner to the Emperor, who called for his maître d'hôtel. Tunan arrived very mortified and served a roast fowl. Napoleon complimented him on it, gave him a few taps in the cheek, and said, Tunan, you are happier as my maître d'hôtel than I am as Emperor. He had these ways which were like excuses even to a maître d'hôtel or a valet de chambre after his short outbursts of anger, or rather his fits of impatience which resulted from causes quite removed from the immediate object which provoked them.